Good morning, everyone. Glad to see everyone out this morning, especially with the temperature. It's cold outside. It's been cold for a while. I think it's supposed to get warmer this week, but it's been dreadfully cold outside. So thank you for bearing with the temperature and making it out this morning. Especially any and all visitors that we have with us. We'd like to let you know you are our honored guest, and we hope to see you at future worship services. And as was said before, especially for those that are visiting, Lawrence Rogers, the minister here at the Westside Church of Christ, is not here today. He will be back next week. He is a visiting professor at Abilene Christian College this week. So he will be here next week. So if you were looking to hear or participate in the Lawrence experience, please, you got to come back next week, because he's an excellent speaker and excellent minister. And thank you, Cordell, for the scripture reading this morning from Matthew 14, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I got a question for you guys. How many of you are dog lovers? This is a bunch of dog lovers. Okay. I can say that I am now. I didn't used to be, though. I used to be dreadfully terrified of dogs. And I'll tell you my story, how it started. I think I was around 5 years old. And one day my dad came home with a grocery bag, paper grocery bag. And he put it down on the floor, and his puppy popped out. And I said, oh, man, that's cool. My dad brought a puppy. And it was good for about half a day. I was chasing the puppy around. He's running. And I guess the puppy got to a point, he was like, oh, okay, he's playing with me. It's cool, so I'm going to play with him. And so he started chasing me. And I just said, no. Let me get up on this couch, and this doesn't work for me. And next thing I know, the dog was gone. So I'm not sure what happened to the dog after that. My father took him somewhere. And ever since then, I've had this fear of dogs. So I've been chased throughout the years. The little neighborhood dog is this dog named Duchess. It was a big German Shepherd. Used to chase us all the time. And then I don't know if I told the story before. I'm not going to go into details, but I was for a summer I was a postal carrier. I may have told the story before. And one of the days I was carrying mail, I was surrounded by dogs. Literally, it was one huge dog, like right at this area, right here. And I managed to escape that. If you want to hear the story, I can tell it to you later. I think I just finished telling Barbara about the story recently. But I managed to after I started my heart again, I managed to escape that. And then finally, I was an adult. One did catch me. I was coming from church and get out of my car, going into my house, and some neighbor's dog came and bit me on my pant leg, or bit me on my knee, near my knee, and messed up my suit. That's why I don't wear suits that often now, because of. Actually, that's not true. I just like to be comfortable. But for years after I got married, my wife and then eventually my daughter bothered me about getting a dog, and it's like I don't want a dog. And finally, they wore me down, and we got a dog a few years ago, Rocky. He was a little Yorkie. And unfortunately, Rocky passed, but he's a cool little dog. And so I got used to having a dog. Now we have Mozart, named after the composer. He doesn't write music or play any instruments or anything but he's a cool dog. So I'm used to dogs now. The fear has been dispelled, because I have an understanding of dogs now. A little cautious with big dogs. I'm still a little cautious, but the fear is gone. And so I'm cool with dogs now. They're cool with me, and I'm cool with them. But prior to me having that experience with them, I was dreadfully afraid. And anytime I would knock on somebody's door and you hear something, yep, I said, oh goodness, they got a dog. I remember Morris came into my house, and he heard, I think it was Rocky. Then he heard the dog. So Morris, I know you can relate. He was a little concerned about what was going to happen once he got in the house. But and I'm gonna come back to this in a second. But how many of you heard of Nina Simone? You've heard of Nina Simone. If you haven't heard of her, she was an American singer. She was a songwriter. She was a pianist. Actually, she started out as a classical pianist, and she was also a civil rights activist. And I didn't know much about her. I knew some of the songs she wrote or sung, And it was this documentary on Netflix that I watched about her, and which was a very good documentary, so if you get a chance to watch it, please do. And there was a section of the documentary where an interviewer asked her what was freedom to her. And she thought about it for a second, and her response, she says, "I'll tell you what freedom is to me." And she said, "No fear." And that actually was very profound. When I heard that, I said, wow, that's kind of deep. And actually, that's what motivated me to put together this sermon today, was based on her response. And fear essentially is bondage. And so how do we break through that bondage to get to freedom? And thus, the title of my sermon today, or lesson today, is Breaking Through the Bondage of Fear. And going to the story that Cordell was reading to us in Matthew 14, just prior to that, earlier in the chapter, the disciples and Jesus had just fed the 5,000. After they had concluded, Jesus made the disciples get in a boat and take off. He told them to go ahead without him and to go to the other side while he dismissed the rest of the crowd that was still there. And after he dismissed them, he went by himself and prayed. So eventually the boat was off a considerable distance from the land, and the waves had started to kick up, and because of the wind. And during that fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to him walking on the lake. And the fourth watch is about between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. And they thought it was a ghost. They were terrified. And Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." And "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down off the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" Now, I don't know if you knew this. Did you know that fear not, or some variant of it, like don't be afraid, or something like that, is in the Bible about 365 times, that theme. And I didn't actually go through and count, but from some reputable sources, I saw that they all agreed that it appeared about 365 times. So it's one of the most mentioned commands in the Bible. So why would that be? Why would that idea be mentioned so often in the Bible? The wrong kind of fear, and later we'll talk about the right kind of fear, is the major obstacle in us having a trusting relationship with God. It also prevents us from being truly free in Christ and from being serious about our Christian walk. So let's identify some fears that cause us to fail at having a meaningful relationship with God. And there's probably a bunch of them that I could list, but I've named a few. The first one is fear of man. And in Matthew 10:28, the Bible reads, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both the soul and body in hell." And in Proverbs 29:25, it says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare or a trap, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." So people generally who allow fear to interfere with their ability to develop a strong relationship with God are concerned about what people might think. And if you remember about them being a Christian or being serious about their walk, and if you remember Peter famously, when he denied Jesus 3 times, even got to the point where he was cursing out somebody just because they associated him with Jesus. And then Peter got pulled up by Paul, and this was, I believe it was in Galatians, because he was with the Gentile Christians and eating with them until some Jews who were of the circumcision, who believed that you had to be circumcised to be a follower of Christ, when they came around, he pulled away from them. Because he was afraid of what the circumcision group was going to think of him, because he was eating with the Gentiles. A lot of us, we're afraid that we're going to be rejected by our friends or colleagues or people that are close to us because we want to follow Christ. And then we fear losing friends. And be honest with you, all of these things may happen, but we can't let that loss or those concerns overpower us, overwhelm us to the point that it causes us not to want to follow Christ as much as we should. And in Matthew 10:37, it says, "Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." So God in Christ expects you to put him above everyone else. So even though you may suffer loss as a result of following him. What is more important? The next one is fear of change. Some of us feel like the more I follow Christ, the more I won't be myself, because he's going to require me to change in some way. It's like I won't be cool anymore. And when I thought about that, I thought of some members here. I immediately thought of that. I know are very cool individuals. They're cool people, and I know that they don't allow the fact that they're Christian impact their coolness. They could be a cool Christian. And I'm not going to name anybody here, because somebody will come up to me and say, I thought I was cool too. So I'm not going to name anybody. But I will use a person I do know that kind of fits this idea, and also the concern that people won't respect us as much as they did before. It was his brother I knew from some years back, who prior to becoming a Christian was a drug dealer, and he was a dealer of some stature. And when he became a Christian, it kind of reminded me of Paul. No matter what he was doing, he put his all into it. And so when he became a Christian, he went right back out on those corners where all these young drug dealers were, and was preaching the gospel to them. And the thing about it is, they still showed him respect. And his nickname or something was Rock, I believe was his nickname. And they were calling him Mr. Rock. And they still respected him, but the fact that he became a Christian didn't impact his cool factor, I guess, so to speak. They still respected him, but he didn't allow his concern about what are they going to think about me to prevent him from going to share the gospel to them. So when you think about this, or feeling like, if I really put forth an effort to follow Christ, I won't be myself, who are you anyway? Think about that. A lot of us don't even really know who we are. Some of us think we do, but we really don't. And many of us allow other people to define who we are. And remember this, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. God made you specifically. He didn't just throw some dust and walk away and stuff just happened. He made you specifically. None of us are mistakes. Even though somebody might say that, none of us are mistakes. He created us to be what he wanted us to be and to carry out his design purpose for us. The more we get to know God, the more we become who we are intended to be. In Matthew 18, starting at verse 1, it says, "At that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' He called a little child and said, and had him stand among them. And he said, 'I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter into the kingdom of heaven.'" Children are heavily dependent on their parents. They recognize that I can't do this by myself. I need you. But when we become adults, we start to think that we don't need anyone else, and we start to think we don't even need God. So let's depend on God to define who we are and not others. The next one is a fear of accountability. A lot of us allow the fact that someone else might tell us that we're doing something wrong, hinder us from developing that true relationship with God. I knew this young man years ago. I kind of mentored him, and I saw him, and he literally grew up in the church. And his family was there, his siblings were there, all of them were baptized believers, but he never got baptized, or he didn't get baptized for a very long time. He didn't get baptized until he was 18, but he had grown up in the church. He was there all the time, and it wasn't like his parents were dragging him to the church. He wanted to be there. He was a joy to have in Bible class. He answered questions. He participated. He for all intents and purposes, he was a great young Christian man, but he just didn't want to get baptized. And one day I asked him, "Why is it that when he was a teenager, why don't you want to get baptized? Yeah, I know you know everything. I know you know everything you need to do." And I was taken aback by what he said. He said, "I don't want to be held accountable." And I thought that was pretty deep for anyone to say, especially a young man, to recognize and be truthful with his thoughts. So a lot of us feel the same way, but we might not vocalize it. We might not even think of it consciously. But we don't want to be held accountable. And fortunately, he did eventually get baptized. Unfortunately, the young man passed at an early age, in his early 20s. But he was a great kid, and like I said, that when he told me that, that's had an impact on me for for the rest of my life. The thing is, he knew that there were expectations when you became a Christian. And to know Christ is to be friends with Christ. And to be friends with Christ is to know his commandments. And in John 15 and 14, the Bible reads, or Jesus says, "You are my friends if you do what I command." So many of us may not be considered or consider Christ our friend, or if Christ might not consider us his friend. We may look at Christ as kind of an associate. You know, if someone were to ask someone who was a friend of Christ what their relationship with him was, they might say, "I love him with all my heart, soul, and mind. I would do anything for him. I trust him with my life." Someone that's associate with Christ might say, "Yeah, I kind of know him. Yeah, I know. No, I don't know him, but we know each other kind of. We see each other from time to time. We're cool with each other, but he does his thing, I do my thing, and I see him from time to time." That's someone who is a associate of Christ. And I think many of us are in that role. You're comfortable with a vague view of his commandments. And imagine if you purchase glasses, and everybody who wears glasses or has taken an eye exam, especially if you wear glasses, and after you take the eye exam, the optician gives you glasses that you can't see out of. It's blurry, and it's kind of makes you kind of a little dizzy. You see maybe forms or silhouettes, but you don't really see clearly. How many people will be comfortable with that? Not many. You would go back and say, "Something's wrong with these glasses, I need them fixed." But when it comes to our view of God's commandments, for some of us, we're comfortable with that very blurry vision of his commandments. And the reason for that, it allows you some wiggle room. It allows you to justify your questionable behavior. The line is over here, and we'll kind of move the line like right behind us so we can feel comfortable, even though the line is still really there. In our mind, it's behind us so we're still good. So we're afraid of feeling guilty about anything. And then you get angry when somebody does correct you. And on the other side of that, sometimes some of us fear holding others accountable. And in the church of Corinth, in chapter 5, the church in Corinth, if you read the Corinthian letters, they were kind of buck wild in Corinth. In chapter 5, this is probably the most egregious thing, was a man was sleeping with his father's wife, his stepmother. And the thing about it is, and the way Paul addressed it, was that he said that they were proud of it. I'm not sure what they showed or what they did to show that they were proud of it, but he chastised them for being proud of that and not being grieved. And he told them to expel this brother. So we tend to minimize someone else's offense so that we can overlook it. So why would we do that? Because if you're really sincere about someone else's fault, if they're in sin, you're really sincere about helping them to get out of that sin, it's not fun to go and challenge someone or correct them. Because a lot of times most people don't take it well. And you have to be careful how you do it. Again, if you're sincere, you have to be careful how you approach someone on that. And we don't like to deal with the aftermath, too, after you've already challenged them, especially if it's someone close to you, say like a spouse or a child or a parent or a close friend. It's very difficult sometimes for us to challenge them or try to correct them because we're afraid of the consequences. How are they going to, what are the repercussions going to be? But if you truly want to seek God and have a good relationship with him and be serious about your walk, you're not going to allow that, even though it's still something to be concerned about and to be, I can understand being fearful of, but you shouldn't let that fear overtake you, that you allow someone to remain in sin because you're afraid of what's going to happen if you challenge them. The next one is the fear of the unknown. A lot of us like to just stay in our comfort zone. We don't want to do or stretch beyond that. We'd rather sit on a bench and watch others do things. We don't necessarily utilize the talents that God has given us, and I can relate to that. And there's some here, and I've asked for their permission for me to use their names, that I've seen throughout the years here who have gone out of their way to go out of their comfort zone. Was it last Sunday, or the Sunday before that, 2 Sundays ago, when we had the event where everybody got up and said something for the end of the year service, and Barbara McKnight got up before us and explained that she had struggled to come up and share in front of everyone. And she had actually waited to the night before she totally agreed to do it. And she really stretched to do that. And I know what she said had a big impact on me. It was very encouraging in the things that she said, and she made herself vulnerable. And without her doing that, I don't know if I would have had that encouragement if she hadn't found the courage to get up in front of us. Maurice, I know for some time he had a strong desire to get up and serve and get up and speak in front of the congregation, but he struggled with it. It was a concern of his, but he overcame that because he saw it was better to serve than to sit on the sidelines. Wendy is another one. Wendy, you know that she leads the human trafficking ministry, and from time to time she'll get up and speak. But that's not easy for Wendy at all. But she doesn't allow that fear to overtake her. She's gone, kind of pushed past it in order to get up and again to serve. And then lastly, Carol. Carol, is one of the workers in the homeless ministry. And Carol shared this, I think it was last year, a couple of years ago. We took some clothes or distributed some clothes to the homeless in the city. And Carol was fearful of going into the city. She's not from that environment. Even those of us who come from that environment, we were, cautious and concerned, and there was reason to be. But she did not allow that to stop her from going. And she went, and we delivered the clothes, and there was some friction while we were there, but she said it enlightened her. And if she hadn't taken the time to have that experience or push through her fear, then she wouldn't have had this new perspective on the homeless, which has driven her to want to serve even more. Again, she did not let the fear of the unknown stop her from serving and, in a sense, developing a better relationship with God. And then lastly, which kind of all these are encompassed in this, is the fear of the cost of following Christ. At the end of Luke 14, the Bible talks about counting the cost. Jesus wants to know if you decide to follow him, you got to come with your eyes wide open, know what you're getting into. But some of those who have difficulty with this, they're concerned about what am I losing versus what am I gaining. They make what's really 20%. You heard the 80-20 rule that is used in a variety of things, but in this instance, 80% is what we are gaining from God if we follow him. Really, it's 100%, but I'll use 80% for now. And then the 20% is what we're losing, and we'll focus on that 20% of what we're losing by following God and put all of our efforts there, and we shortchange God. So many of us unfortunately find satisfaction in being mediocre Christians, and we convince ourselves that that's enough. Fear keeps us from stepping out to let loose God's supernatural power into our lives, and don't realize what we're missing out on. Stepping out calls for courage, the power to act in spite of our fears, which I've given you a number of examples within our own congregation. And courage requires faith that God will do what he has promised. So I mentioned earlier that these were the wrong kind of fears. So what is the right kind of fear? And the right kind of fear is the fear of God. And I have this quote from the Christianity Today periodical, and it's written by someone by the name of Oswald Chambers. It says, "The remarkable thing about fearing God is that when you fear God, you fear nothing else. Whereas if you do not fear God, you fear everything else." So the fear of God is motivated by his awesome power and justice. And I don't know and I don't often do this, and I'm speaking to myself as I'm speaking to you as well. How often do we get up in the morning and just thank God for waking up and sincerely thank God? How many of us take time to look at this wonder, look at trees and birds and all the things that he's created, and think about how awesome is being that created all this stuff. I think I can't speak for everyone else, but I know oftentimes I just take it for granted. I don't think about it. God is awesome. It's unbelievable that he's been able to do all of these things. It's unbelievable, but I don't think we really take time to think about that. Our fear may start with what he might do to us if we don't follow him, but we shouldn't stay there. It should go from fear and trembling to move to reverence and awe as we get to know him better. And the more we get to know him, we get a clear picture of ourselves. That's a byproduct of it. And we begin to see how much we really need him. So knowing him more fully allows him to show us how to choose his way. In Psalms 25:12, it says, "Who then is the man that fears the Lord? He will instruct him in the way chosen for him." So what do you think? If you are letting fear prevent you from developing a meaningful and rich relationship with God and being serious about your Christian walk, what are you going to do about it? Do you want to stay mediocre? Who likes to be mediocre? In any other aspect of our life, that's not acceptable, but for some reason in our Christian walk, being mediocre is okay. Do you want to stay mediocre or even worse, lukewarm? And lukewarm is where you're just indifferent or you're a hypocrite, which Jesus says he was spit out of his mouth. And for those that are outside of the body of Christ or God's family of believers, do you wish to remain disconnected from God? Just recently, our marriage ministry, Feds, our last meeting, the holiday meeting, we talked about developing spiritual goals. And what we were planning on doing, what the plan is that each spouse would develop spiritual goals and share with their spouse. And then each spouse is supposed to figure out a way to help their spouse achieve their spiritual goals. So I'm going to challenge everyone, actually, to create spiritual goals for 2018 with the purpose of dispelling fear and to grow your relationship with God. And pick someone that you trust to share them with so that they can hold you accountable. And as we close, if you need prayers for this effort or anything or something that's praiseworthy, come in front and share those things with us. And if you are not a member of the family of God and you want to develop a friendship with God and you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and you want to turn away from the world and turn your mind and your ways towards God, you can start checking off your first spiritual goal today by becoming a member of the Lord's church, by making that first step of obedience, by being baptized today. So you can come forward and make your intentions known as we sing the hymn of encouragement. And thank you all for your attention.